Good evening. This is Town Hall, the Solar News Channel's venue for discussions ranging far and wide, virtual and otherwise. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Jesse Robredo's sudden death in August 2012 left a nation not just in mourning, but more demanding of its leaders. The Robredo standard of servant leadership and matino at mahusay still resonates to this day, or at least we hope. So what is servant leadership to you, and who best exemplifies it? Can we be servant leaders ourselves in whatever path we choose to take, whether we are in government, NGO work, or in the private sector? We are airing live from the De La Salle University's Natividad Fajardo Auditorium. De La Salle is celebrating its University Week, which has as its theme, Mission in Service. And that explains why we talk about servant leadership tonight. Our guests, Mila Magsaysay Valenzuela, daughter of the late former President Ramon Magsaysay, who was one of the more beloved presidents whose term was cut short by an airplane crash. Dr. Tereso Tuliao, who I'm told is one of the more, correct me if I'm wrong, popular teachers here in La Salle. He has, after all, devoted the last 41 years of his life to teaching and is one of the Metrobank Foundation's outstanding teachers for 1993. Dean Jose Manuel Chel Diokno, who founded the De La Salle Law School and is every inch his father's son, a brave human rights lawyer and compassionate Filipino. After graduation from law school in 1985, a very short stint in private practice gave way to work in government for attorney Jose Jojo Mejia, first with one of the more respected senators of the post-EDSA era, Rene Sagisag, and then with the newly created Department of Agrarian Reform. Attorney Mejia now sits on the Judicial and Bar Council as representative of the academe and is on leave from his law firm, where he is a founding partner, and also from La Salle, where he teaches. Our netizens who will be live tweeting the show, attorney Kim Indar, who is at Kim Indar on Twitter, June Poblador, who is at Pinoy_Daddy on Twitter, and Nikki de Guzman, who is at No Other Nikki on Twitter. The questions we want you to answer are, what is servant leadership and who best exemplifies it? You can use the hashtag #TownHallServantLeader when you send in a reply via Twitter to @SolarTVNews or to any of our netizens. We flashed their Twitter names on screen so that you can see them, or via Facebook to the Solar News Channel. Let's begin with the discussion. Mrs. Mila Magsaysay Valenzuela. Ma'am, your father was president in the early 1950s. At the time, the term servant leadership was not yet in vogue. But knowing what it means today, was he a servant leader?
Well,
You can put your mic
I
here,
should
ma'am.
think so because there's a new book now that came out in 2012. And in that book, his stint in government as from guerrilla to military governor, to congressman, to defense secretary, and then the presidency, is described by the author, Professor Jose Abueva, as he would be a servant leader. His style of service was that of a servant leader.
We've heard many stories about him, but there's a whole, well, I can't even say whole generation. There must be 3 generations, and one of them is present tonight, in our live audience here with us in De La Salle, who are not familiar with him. Can you describe what he was like as a president and why he deserves to be called a servant leader also?
Well, for me, the best example of a servant leader is Jesus Christ, right? A servant leader is somebody who decides very deeply, goes into a deep thought and process to serve his fellow men. And that's where it starts. Even if you start as he started as a mechanic. He was the follower, and then he was promoted to supervisor and then manager. That's the beginning of the leadership aspect of his life. And then he volunteered in the guerrilla movement. And then when the Americans came to our rescue, he was appointed military governor, and then he became a congressman, and that's his path. From the time he was military governor to president, it was only 7 years. In 7 years, he was president. So a servant leader has the values, begins with, I guess, the passion or the integrity of intention to serve. And that's what my father was. And that's what we observed since we were, old enough to know what service to fellow man is.
How old were you, ma'am, when he became president?
17.
17.
Yes.
At the time, is it true, he opened Malacanang's doors, and anybody could walk in?
Yes.
Seriously?
And in fact, from Luneta, after the inaugural speech and all, everybody followed us to the palace, and everybody went up to the palace, and all the gates are open, because his rationale was, this is not his palace, this is the palace of the people, and they should see it.
Okay, hindi nagwala ang PSG at the time.
Nandun din sila, pero
Wala
the
silang
instruction
magagawa.
was clear.
We can't see anything like that happening, no, in these next few years. Dr. Teresa Tuliao is also here with us. Dr. Tuliao, you dedicated your life to being a teacher, department chair and dean here in LaSalle. Why didn't you do something else?
I think I meant to be a teacher. This was really an answer to a challenge posed by the student leaders of this university in the 1970s, serve the people. But many of my classmates some of them went to the mountains. I don't think I do have the personality or the inclination to be in the mountain. The most that I can do in serving the people is to teach, and I teach well.
Yes, you do, I heard. And you never left LaSalle.
Yes, it was my first job. I was supposed to retire 2 years ago, but since, they have extended me, I'm also known here as the owner of De La Salle because my
Oh, I
contemporaries
see.
are either infirm, buildings, or dead.
Okay.
I can say that I am the owner.
Okay, papalitan po natin yung card dyan sa ilalim ng pangalan nyo. Dr. Teresa Tuliao, owner de La Salle University. Palitan na po natin dyan sa studio. Dean Shell Diokno, Mrs. Valenzuela is not the only one here with a very famous parent. Your own father, the great Pepe Diokno, was also servant leader back when the term was also not yet used. Can you describe how he was, what he was like? Tell us stories that we've never heard.
I was very lucky to have my father as a role model. He never really preached to us or told us what to do. He led by example. He listened with respect. He always gave anyone that he was talking to a lot of consideration and respect. I think his decisions in life were driven by his values, and that was something that we all saw and I think tried to emulate. One other thing about him was he cultivated followers who could also be leaders themselves. And that is why perhaps organizations that he established before are still around today. And one last thing that would probably epitomize him would be that his courage came from the strength of his convictions. And all of these things were things that I grew up in that kind of environment. So it was sort of a challenge for all of us children to try to follow what the example that he had set.
A challenge, but you are your father's son, and you're all molded in
It's not
exactly the
easy.
same.
It's
Not
not
easy,
easy
huh?
to be the son of a father like that. When I was growing up, I looked at him more like I looked at him with awe, and it was very difficult sometimes to bridge the distance because everyone who was around him treated him with a lot of respect and admiration. But at the same time, I was inspired and I wanted to be like that. So perhaps that is also why I decided to take up law. What really impressed me, I think, was when I was 12 years old and he was arrested by the martial law regime. And I was there that particular evening. We were all awake. About 30 or 40 soldiers, fully armed, came to the house. They knocked on the door and they said they wanted to see Senator Diokno. And my sister and I went upstairs, knocked on our parents' door, and he was very calm and relaxed, came down, met the officers and the officer said, "Is this we would like to invite you to Camp Crame." And he simply said, "Is this an invitation that I can refuse?" And the officer, who was a bit sad, I guess his expression was, he said, "I'm sorry, sir, you cannot refuse this invitation." So very calmly,
Walang RSVP.
no reaction. He said, "Okay, will you please give me a few minutes? I'll just go up and get my bags." And he went up and gave us some instructions, talked to my mom, and went down. And it was like it's not the kind of reaction that we would expect for someone who was about to be put in jail. And when he was in detention, we were very angry. As a child, I was wondering why there was no charges filed against him. There was no reason for him to be detained. And sometimes we would express that anger to him. And sometimes it would reflect on how we would treat the soldiers who were guarding him. So one time he said to us, you shouldn't look down or be angry at the soldiers. It's not their fault. They're just doing their job. And don't keep anger in your hearts. And I still remember that up to now.
He treated the soldiers with respect.
Yes.
Attorney Georgia Mejia, when you were a young lawyer, you decided, and just fresh out of law school, you decided that you would join government, the staff, working on the staff of Senator Sagisag and also the Department of Agrarian Reform. You could have chosen to just be comfortable. Why didn't you?
Okay, we graduated in 1985, law school. In college, I graduated in 1980, at a time when you know who the president was, no? So, in 1983, when Ninoy Aquino died, there was really a frustration among us lawyers kasi we were studying the rule of law, and yet it was so frustrating that, the number one law violator is the president. I mean, we were taught about separation of powers, and yet we had a president who was the executive and at the same time the legislator. So, sabi nga ni Dr. Tulio kanina, siguro sa mga kabataan at one point in time, they want to become a priest. During our time, we thought of going to the hills because of that frustration. And if I may just take this opportunity, maybe Chel does not know this, one of those who really inspired us was his dad, no? We tried as law students, we tried to work for, the marginalized. And bisan 5 lang kami, we would invite Senator Diokno, pupunta yan. It's like James Yap playing in a barangay basketball tournament, And we were so inspired that we wanted to emulate what he was doing. And therefore, in 1986, when we passed the bar, that was the time when the EDSA revolution came about. And then, Cory Aquino became president. Sabi ni Butsabad sa akin, naging sekretary siya ng Darjo, ito na yung pinakikipaglaban natin. So why don't you join me?
Magka-batch kayo sa law school?
Mas matanda sa akin si Butch, pero
Ay, okay. Sige, wala siya dito para sagutin.
Pero
okay.
magka-batch kami sa law school. And then, he was the first one who invited me. No, actually, it was Rene Sagisag, who was also one of my mentors. No? But when the opportunity to work for agrarian reform, which at that time, was nung araw, you talk about getting lands. It was, komunista ka na. But this time, we said, maybe this is our opportunity to, to make, to live out what we've always strove for.
Okay. Let's go back to Mrs. Mila Magsaysay Valenzuela. Ma'am, the best way for children to learn, of course, is from the example their parents set. The way Dean Shell was telling that story about how he grew up with his father.
That's
I
right.
understand the example that your father set for you and your 2 siblings was about simple living. Can you tell us the story about the earrings first?
Oh, well, this was already when when he was president, and we were teenagers. And in those days, moda yung bang mga malalaki na fancy, no? And I was going to a party. And he noticed my big earring. He said, "Oy, Iha, ang laki naman yan. Daddy, 10 pesos lang naman ito eh." Ay, naku, alisin mo yan. Because people will think that that's real because you're the daughter of the president, and they'll think I've stolen money. Yan. Things
Okay.
like that. Besides, we were never rich. We were always middle class. And we
How
were,
much money did he have in his vault at the
when
time
he passed
died?
away, 2,000 pesos in his vault.
2,000
No
pesos.
bank account.
Uh-huh.
And the only house we had was something he built in 1933 with a loan from the bus company that he worked for. And that's the only house we had until
Okay.
he died.
Okay.
And part of St. Benilde, there in Arellano Avenue, is our lot. It's included in the La Salle campus there.
Oh, okay. There is also a story about birthday celebrations. What was his rule about birthday celebrations?
Whenever we'd invite classmates, or let me tell you about my 18th birthday. Nobody wanted to, he was very strict with the spending. And I was afraid, or my mom, I said, "Mom, mag-birthday naman ako, debut." That's every 18-year-old girl dreams of. So when my mom asked him, he readily accepted. Yes, of course, Mila will have a debut. And of course, I had one. I had the first dance was with my dad, my lolo and lola, my friends, and my classmates, my relatives, my cousins were there. But that was deducted from his salary, of course, no? I still have a copy of a what do you call that? A salary.
Payslip.
A payslip, yeah, a payslip. One payslip that my mother kept.
Uh-huh.
In front was how much he was earning.
How much was he earning? 5,000 pesos?
5,000 pesos. And at the back, all the deductions.
Uh-huh. Okay. All the deductions including the expenses for your debut.
Expenses, like if my brother invites some friends, merienda, deduct.
Okay. Dr. Tuliao, I'm sure in the 41 years that you've been here in La Salle, there have been many offers for you to join the private sector. Am I correct?
Well, private sector and government.
And government.
Yeah. Well, of course, there were offers, but I always believed that I am meant to be a teacher. I said, some of my students would ask me, "Why don't you join the government? You're a good speaker." I said, my vocation is really to be a prophet, not to be in government.
A
okay?
prophet.
Yes.
A prophet, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Why prophet? Why do you use the term prophet?
Prophet in the sense that, well, I think not only Jun Tuliao, but most of the academicians and those who are in school, as intellectuals, we're supposed to say, to critique what is going on in this society. And you can only do that in the academe, at least with your students. And so the reason why I chose teaching, aside from that, is that it gave me, or it gives me, meaning. Okay, I don't only teach, I do research. I'm a consultant to several government institutions and international organizations. And I write textbooks, I write in Filipino. I have written several books towards the intellectualization of Filipino. So in fact, I like to speak in Filipino, but since everyone is
Yes, I'm sorry. We have to speak.
hindi,
Pwede
hindi
rin.
masyado sigurong malalim ang aking ang aking pamamilipino. Kanya, yun, no? Nais ko lamang magkaroon ng katuturan ng aking buhay, at ang buhay na may katuturan ay nakita ko sa pagtuturo. Makikita nyo rin ang inyong katuturan sa inyong pagninilay-nilay, okay? Sa inyong meditation.
Discernment.
Discernment, yan, okay? At kayo lamang ang makakaalam niyan. Hindi lahat ay matutuwa at makakakuha ng kaligayahan sa pagtuturo, ngunit nakuha ko ito. Makukuha ninyo yan sa iba't ibang mamamaraan dahil ang bawat isa sa atin ay may kanya-kanyang bokasyon.
Okay, vocation,
Yeah.
calling. That's what servant leadership is all about, right? And then you said katuturan, meaning.
Yeah.
Was it Gandhi who said the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others? That is finding meaning.
Yes, definitely. Oo. Yun ang, well, of course, the previous Pope, Benedict XVI, said it, succinctly. It's all about relationship. It's our relationship. I teach because that is my relationship with my students. And the greatest relationship is my relationship with the Tao, with God.
Thank you, Dr. Tuliao. Dean Shell Diokno, you're described as very pasensyoso and very soft-spoken, pero pag may ipinaglalaban, napakatapang nyo raw. Pwede kayong maging matapang. Why are you so passionate about human rights, the law, and teaching it?
Well, I think I'm passionate about human rights because I saw how easily human rights were violated when I was a young man. And it really inflamed me that that could happen in a country like ours. We have such a beautiful country, we have such beautiful people, but we had a government at the time that was really the antithesis of the kind of governance that I think we would all want for our people and for the children. My interest in law, of course, came from the fact that my father was a lawyer and his father was a lawyer. When I was 12, I remember, this was 1974, most of the civilian courts were closed, but the military tribunals were still open. My dad, during the summer, would look for me. And the minute I would hear him calling, I would have an idea of what he wanted. And he would ask me, "Are you doing anything?" And of course, I would say, "No." He says, "Come with me, I'm going to court." And I would run to my room, dress up in a polo barong, and proudly carry his bag.
How old were you then?
12 or
12,
13.
okay.
And on certain occasions, because it was a military court, I was allowed to sit at the counsel's table. Now, usually that's only reserved for members of the bar. But I never got bored because the lawyers who were there, who were appearing for those who had been arrested by that regime, they were the best and the most brilliant lawyers I think that the country has produced. So from that time, the courtroom became like my second home. And it was a natural decision for me to take up law after. I particularly have a very closeness with prisons and jails, probably because of that experience. I distinctly remember when I was 16, and it was summer, I was working for my dad's law office, and he sent me to the Manila City Jail. I had never been to the city jail. So I took a bus, took a jeep, got lost, found my way to the jail. And when I entered, the jail guard, they stamp you when you enter the jail. And he said, "Boy, pag mawala yan mamaya, hindi ka makakalabas." And I had several things to do in the jail. I had to talk to my father's client. I had to get a copy of certain records. So by the time I came out, it was the heat of summer, talagang wala na yung marka ko. So I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to get out. But of course, nothing happened when I left. And when I got back to my father's office, he asked me, "Oh, what happened?" I was too ashamed to tell him the story. And I just told him what I had done in the jail.
Okay. Attorney George Mejia, before we turn to our social media and our netizens, while in the Senate, on the staff of Senator Sagisag, or in the Department of Agrarian Reform, or now in the Judicial and Bar Council, do you find that power and position can be tempting? This is something that all servant leaders have to deal with, hindi ba?
Well, if we think about the concept of servant leadership, you will have an impression that it's an oxymoronic term, no? Kasi servant leader. Pero kung tutusin, it's not, no? Because being a leader really means serving others, no? So servant leadership, to my mind, requires a deep-seated and a genuine desire to be of service, no? Having said that, if that is one's frame of mind, I don't think power can corrupt the person who wants to genuinely serve. No, so incidental lang yung position. When Senator Sagisag pag sinusulat niya sa kanyang resume, he's proud to have been a barangay captain or barangay kagawad in Pasig. Parang proud siya of being a barangay captain as he is proud of being a senator, because to him it does not really make a difference, no? So you can be the lowliest security guard, kumbaga, doing your work honestly, and you can be the president of the Philippines doing your work honestly, and both of you will be considered as servant leaders, to my mind.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for all those thoughts from our guests tonight. What are people saying now on social media? This is what we'd like to know from our netizens who are live tweeting the show, and I'm sure they're getting some replies and retweets from our virtual audience that are really interesting. Let's begin with Kim Andar. Kim, what are people saying now?
There is one E-Concepcion. From E-Concepcion, she said, we need more servant leaders in the government, those who serve selfishly. And I hope they are endangered species, not extinct.
Endangered species.
Yeah.
June Poblador, what are they
Okay,
saying?
we have one from at Joseph Kataan. Simple lifestyle, transparent, and you'll see them working hard every day. They are the town hall, or they are what we call servant leaders.
Okay, and Nikki de Guzman?
Yes, we have one from Binibining Camel. Said that a servant leader should give premium to the good of the people and not his or her personal motives.
All right, thank you. Town Hall, servant leadership will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Town Hall, the Solo News Channel's venue for discussions ranging far and wide, virtual and otherwise. We're talking about servant leadership. We're broadcasting live from the Natividad Fajardo Auditorium here in De La Salle University in Manila. I'm Pia Ontiveros. We asked you two questions and we asked you to reply via Twitter using the hashtag Town Hall Servant Leader or via Facebook. Our questions were, what is servant leadership and who best exemplifies it? And these are some of your answers. Irish Manlapa said, a servant leader puts the needs of his people first. He does not use his power just to lead, but also to share. At Agent Bravelight said, servant leadership is forgetting your extravagant lifestyle and car collecting hobby and focus more on your job as ama ng bansa. Who is she referring to? Pinoy Mommy said, a leader who does not need credit for his accomplishments and considers it a privilege to serve the public. Estelita Villa tweeted, Brother Armin Luistro. Siyempre, we're in La Salle. Simply Zaida said, a leader who will keep his or her promises and put the people's welfare above anything. Navy is the new pink on Twitter said, servant leadership is responding to the citizens' concern without any political grandstanding, and added that the late Secretary Jesse Robredo best exemplifies servant leadership. On Facebook, Angelito Bautista Jr. said, and we quote, servant leadership is leadership with a purpose of we before I. Jesse Robredo is one good example, a leader who considers the needs of his constituents over the perks of being a politician. Amy Castino said, servant leadership is a leadership with a commitment to serve the people without asking or waiting for any recognition. For me, the late Secretary Jesse Robredo, again, is a good example of a servant leader. He listened to his people's needs, listened, just like your dad, Dean Chell, and remained simple and humble. And Aliyah Sawadjaan said, servant leadership means serving the people first, ensuring that their needs are taken care of first in the best and most practical way possible. Telling people that they are their bosses while snubbing their cries during a crisis and blaming other people is not servant leadership. Let's go back also to our netizens. I wanted to ask them to define first what servant leadership is and to tell us who best exemplifies servant leadership. Nikki de Guzman, can you tell us?
I would say the person who best exemplifies servant leadership would be Chairman Gordon of the Red Cross. And I think
The first person to be named servant leader here tonight who is still alive. Everybody else has passed on.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, you think that?
Okay, well, I think a servant leader is someone who focuses on identifying and meeting the needs of others than trying to acquire power, wealth, and fame for themselves.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me correct myself. No, Brother Armin, of course, is alive and well. Okay, June, Poblador.
For me, just as what everybody had been tweeting, it's Jesse Robredo. He's my best example as a servant leader. And for me, a servant leader is someone who uses leadership as a means to obtain the general good, not as a desired personal end.
Okay, and Kim, Indar?
Yes, for me, servant leadership, the essence is a decentralized entity, division of labor, people empowerment, innovation, and encourages the people in the entity to participate.
And who best exemplifies that?
For me, I can see Pinoy. He's sincere. As I said, the concept of kayo ang boss ko, it came from servant leadership philosophy, but I don't know. I think it's only in principle. We don't know those people.
Only in principle, meaning?
We don't know those people are on him things the same way.
Yung mga
Think
nakapaligid
the
sa
same way.
kanya?
Yeah, the people in the government. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to our netizens. Let's go back to our four guests. The question is, do we elect servant leaders? Attorney Jojo Mejia?
Well, I would say yes and no, no? Yes, in the sense that somehow there are, people who genuinely want to serve are elected to, to the Senate, to Congress, as mayors, no? But it is disappointing that, there are people whom we know can really serve, but, they're not elected. Kasi the general sense of the people is that, there's nothing in it for me from this person in terms of, dole outs, etc. No? But, so I would say mostly there are people who are not really genuine servant leaders, but because of political, for want of a better term, maneuverings or, they get elected. But there are some who, genuine leaders, servant leaders who also get elected by virtue of their own merit.
Who, by the way, Attorney Mejia, best exemplifies servant leadership for you?
Marami, pero talking about Jesse Robredo, I've heard a lot of stories about him. I saw one personal data sheet, no? He was already the secretary of the DILG, no? Nakalagay doon, Jesus Robredo, sabi niya, what do you call this, work or something. Nakalagay doon, government employee. Instead of putting their secretary of, he said government employee. And, he's the one, makikita mo, I've seen a lot of, people in government. Merong isa, makikita mo naman sa mata pa lang nila that they're not sincere in what they do, no? I saw one, senator, kakamayan ka, pagtalikod niya, pati yung mga guards niya, pati yung mga, meaning, not out of, just out of a perfunctory effort to, to shake hands, no? But when you look at them in the eyes, no, you will see how genuine leadership that, they exude, I should say.
Humility and sincerity, some of the traits, of a servant leader. Dean Chel Diokno, do we elect servant leaders?
Well, the problem, I think, with our present system of elections is it's very much a popularity contest. And not those who are popular may not necessarily be leaders, really, or servant leaders, as we understand it. What would probably help us, I think, is to increase the voter awareness and our understanding of what it takes to run a government. And perhaps the media can also play a big role in that respect. It's difficult given the system that we have, to really discern whether someone can lead this country in a way that we would want. Sometimes we just have an image of a person and we elect that person because of the image rather than because of what they can actually do.
Thank you, Dean Chell. Dr. Tuliao, who best exemplifies servant leadership for you?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Now, I am talking as a prophet. Now, can I deviate from the question? Because
Okay.
for this country, and as an intellectual, it's not servant leadership that we want. It is a leader with a vision. And to me, with my indulgence to the great Ramon Magsaysay and Jose W. Chocno, I consider Manuel Quezon as a leader with a vision. Transferring the capital from Manila to Quezon City, making Filipino as a national language when everyone spoke in English and Spanish. That is a leader with a vision. And he made a dent in international diplomacy by accepting the German Jews in this country. That is a leader with a vision. He has a vision for this country, and he has a vision for all Filipinos.
Do we elect servant leaders?
Well, they do serve. In fact, they won't be elected if they don't serve. But that's the reason why I deviated from the question, okay, on servant leadership. Because, I mean, if you look at our barangay captains, okay, they serve the needs of their constituents. What do they need? Well, they provide funds for their fiestas, for their basketball tournaments, okay? Yesterday, we had, I think, injections for anti-rabies, okay? So these are the needs of these, but are these leaders, do they have a vision for our barangay? Do they have a vision for our city? Well, to that extent, I think the late Secretary Robledo had a vision for Naga, and he really transformed Naga.
Okay. Mrs. Valenzuela, do we elect servant leaders?
I guess very rarely.
Very rarely. Okay.
But I'd like to agree with
Dr.
June here,
Tuliao.
yes, doctor, that servant leaders have a vision. My late father had a vision for a better life for the Filipinos after the war. No? We were very much devastated, and we needed a lot of reconstruction of not only of infrastructure and all, but to give hope to the Filipinos after the terrible war. And that was his vision, was to give a better life to the Filipinos after the war. And my father's belief is he put it in writing. He had a credo. I don't think everybody knows this, but one of them is very familiar to you. That is, those who have less in life should have more in law. You always hear that, and that's the second of my father's 10 beliefs, and it's in writing. I'm giving a copy to Pia. It's just too bad that he did not, that he died young. He was only 49. And there's a lot of likeness that I see in Jesse Robredo with what my father was. He wanted to serve without, their only satisfaction is to see that the people are peaceful, they have livelihood, they have better lives, they can eat 3 meals, very basic.
Okay.
And he was also a stickler for transparency. And I'm giving the credit to Pia here. I would say that he had firm belief on 10 things, and he made this belief known to all those who were working with him. Those who bought in, who believed in what he believed, were very effective in their job.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Valenzuela. We like to look up to our leaders to show us the way, no? But I suppose we can be leaders in our own spheres of influence, and this is good enough, a good time as any to talk to this hall full of students, because these are people who are in, I think, the middle of discernment, siguro, no? Nasa sangandaan, nag-iisip kung anong gagawin nila after graduation. So I guess the question is, how can they be servant leaders or even leaders with a vision? What can they do? Can we ask Attorney Mejia first?
You know, one of my favorite quotations is that from Carl Rodin, no, a famous sculptor. He said, "Love your calling with passion," he said. No? It is the meaning of your life. So to me, whatever you want to do in life, do it the best way you can and do it honestly. In doing that, you will be, contributing, and you will be making a difference in the lives of others.
Thank you, Attorney Mejia. Dean Chell?
Well, I think that leaders should lead by trust rather than by control. There's a very big difference between a leader who centralizes all authority in himself or herself and in effect doesn't really trust his followers to be able to do the right thing. Many perhaps of our present leaders seem to take that kind of mode, but perhaps for the future, the types of leaders that we would want to develop for us would be leaders who will be able to trust their followers enough that they will be able to do something good. Second, I think leaders have to listen. They have to learn how to listen with respect and to understand that everyone is a person who has a dignity that we must revere. I think these are things that we are trying to adopt actually in the College of Law of De La Salle, and we want to impart on them not just their knowledge of the law, but their understanding of people and for them to have a heart for their fellow men and women. One of the things that we've been doing is we are involved in giving legal aid. We have a legal aid clinic. We're one of the few private law schools that renders legal aid. And just recently, we went to Tacloban. We conducted the legal mission there because I think we realized that the people there not only need relief goods, they not only need help in rebuilding their houses, they need help in rebuilding their lives. And for them to rebuild their lives, they're going to need legal assistance. We were shocked actually when we went. We had a contingent of students and professors. And we were shocked that many of the victims of Typhoon Yolanda did not even know their rights. There was one person there, he had been working as a waiter for more than 20 years. His employer was deducting SSS from him, but he didn't know, pwede pala akong mangutang, pwede pala akong mag-claim ng benefits. And our students, I think their eyes were really opened by that. And they came to me after and they said, we want to come back. Let's do something this summer.
Okay.
And let's give help that we can give to the victims there. We worked with a very, very good organization there, Ideals, an NGO, and in fact we are trying to help as much as we can all the different parts of those areas that have been affected. One of them actually are the courts. We visited the courts there.
Regional trial courts.
Yes, the regional trial courts. Ang natira na lang doon yung building. All of the court records have been destroyed, their computers are gone, even their furniture. Yung kanilang courtroom, ginawa nilang sampayan. Kasi you cannot leave those papers out to dry in the sun. They're just going to get brittle.
Okay.
So we are trying our best to help them, not just by giving legal assistance, but the university would also like to help in terms of the equipment and infrastructure that they lack.
Okay. Dr. Tuliao.
Well, sa mga kabataan, ang aking mensahe ay pag-usayan ninyo ang inyong ginagawa. Happiness is where you are. And when you excel, you will shine. And when you shine, ang mga tao mismo ang hahanga sa inyo at kayo ay pipiliing leader. Kaya lang, wag namang pumasok sa inyong ulo ang katanyagan. Kinakailangan sa pagsulong nyo, kasama ninyo ang libo-libo, kung hindi mang milyong-milyong Pilipino. Yan ang tunay na leader, yan ang tunay na excellence.
Magbabalik po ang Town Hall makalipas ang ilang minuto. Welcome back to Town Hall. Our topic tonight is servant leadership. We're coming to you live from the De La Salle University here in Manila. We've heard plenty from our television and virtual audience. We'd like to hear what our live audience, young people, the students of De La Salle, are thinking and wish to ask. The first question will come from Lester Vincent Ortilla. He's a convener of the Graduate Student Council. Lester?
Okay. My question is, how can we evaluate as a leader that we are a servant leader? Because of the responsibilities that we have, we tend to lose track of what we're doing right now. So how can we evaluate that we are still a student or a servant leader itself?
And your question is for?
For Attorney Jockna.
Well, first, I think you can ask yourself, do you really listen to others and do you consider and respect their views? That's very important. A servant leader is someone who I think believes that he doesn't have all the answers himself. And that the more we can get people involved, then the easier it is to find an answer. The second thing I think is, are your decisions driven by your values? If your decisions are driven only by compromises or by things that maybe do not really come from what you believe, then it's very difficult to say that you are a servant leader. Third, whatever we do, there is always going to be the fear of failure. And as leaders, we must be able to confront that fear. We must be able to understand that sometimes you have no choice but to jump. And when you have that fear, I think you can ask yourself, am I strong enough to do this? Where do I get my strength? And I think the strength that you can get really has to come from your convictions. There's no other place in us that we can get it from except from there.
All right, let's get a few more questions, brief questions and brief answers. The next one will come from Jose Miguel Moreno. He's president of the University Student Government.
Many people would claim that the university is a microcosm society. So my question is, how important do you think is a student leader's experience in the university in his or her formation in becoming a servant leader or a leader with a vision of society?
Your question is for?
For Dr. Tuliao.
Well, my criticism about the current student governance and leadership is that you are imitating some of our national and local leaders. My challenge to you is, if you want to be a servant leader, you have to deviate from the norm and be very inclusive and not extractive in your leadership.
Third question will come from Julie Ann Santioque, Chairperson, Council of Student Organizations.
For me, which do you think is better? A person or a leader who knows the responsibility well but without character, or a leader who has the character but doesn't know at all the work or the responsibility of being a leader?
Question 4. You're looking at Attorney Mejia?
All right.
Actually, kaugnay din yun sa sagot kanina. What is important for a person is his value, ano? And this is something that we really try to teach because I also happen to be a teacher here. And we keep on telling our students that, the word integrity comes from the word integral, which means whole. And you should start maintaining your wholeness as a person, even from the little things that you do. If you start cheating in quizzes, then what will stop you from cheating and the government, the people, no? So I think a person who has character and who values his values, no, is the best servant leader that we can have.
All right, next question from Harold Jefferson Casanias, Executive Secretary, Council of Student Organizations.
For Dr. Tuliao, how will you say that a servant leader is effective in terms of what he or she is doing? How can you say? Or what will be the method?
I think the effectiveness of that servant leader will depend on the followers. If the followers really will support the programs of this servant leader, then I think it's a very effective one. In fact, the problem in this country is not about leadership. The problem in this country is about followership. And if you have those great followership, I think you are a great leader.
Miggy Gamboa, Vice Vice Chairperson External, CSO, question.
For Attorney Mejia, a while ago you said servant leadership is that genuine passion to serve others, to put the people you're serving before your own needs. So our generation right now, we personally see people being more profit-driven and self-driven. So how can you ingrain this concept of servant leadership, especially for the apathetic student, the normal, regular student here in La Salle University?
Right. Try to answer that briefly.
Okay. Again, it's really building up and making the student realize how important the basic values are. No? Like for example, simplicity, no? Sabi nga ng isang kanta ni Gary Granada, no? Habang marami kang kailangan, sabi niya, ang bagahe bumibigat, no? So sa simula pa lamang, kailangan matutuhan mo yung value ng pagpamumuhay ng payak, no? Living a simple life, no? So I think when you have these basic values, no, then everything else is just a footnote. Okay.
All right, very quickly, we will check in one last time with our netizens. Kim, June, and Nikki, what are people saying? Very quickly. Go ahead. June.
Okay, from Tikitin, Christine Gonzaga. A servant leader's loyalty and commitment should be first and foremost to the Filipino people, not to dynasties or to their political parties.
All right, Nikki?
Well, we have one from E-Concepcion, Ethel Concepcion. She said that a servant leader must be meant for others.
Sounds Atenean, ano?
Yes.
She is.
Kim?
We have article Ikjesor. I said, servant leadership is not about having power for power's sake, but using power as a useful means to a noble end.
You know, we only have 1 minute to go, but I need to give you time for final words. So can you say your final words in like 10 seconds each? Mrs. Valenzuela?
Well, we have so many potential leaders in our country. We just have to be very choose the right ones by being very discerning. You should have a criteria to base your vote on. And it's all up to the Filipino people. It's really, you are the leaders, the Filipino people are the leaders by choosing the right one to follow.
Attorney Mejia?
The greatest use of life, somebody said, is to dedicate it to something that outlasts it. So if you have the opportunity to serve others and to make a difference, please go for it.
Thank you. Dr. Tuliao?
I am urging you to be excellent followers.
Thank you, sir. And Dean Chel Diokno?
Put others above yourself and be the best that you can be.
Thank you very much to our live audience tonight. Thank you to the De La Salle College of Law and the De La Salle University of Manila for hosting us. And thank you to our guests, Attorney George Mejia, Dean Chel Diokno, Dr. June Tuliao, and Mrs. Mila Valenzuela. Thank you very much. And thank you to our netizens, Kim Indar, June Poblador, and Nikki De Guzman. This has been a Solar News Channel special, Town Hall, Servant Leadership. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Thank you. Good night.
Walang komplikasyon ng buhay mo noon. Kalooban mo'y panata, kalangitan ay maliwanag. Ang daan ay tuwid at patag sa buhay mo noon. Alam mong bawat pusong nagmamahal dumarating sa sangandaan ngayon.